Chapter 7. The Kingdom of Waywood. By the time Lee the Snake moved back onto the woodland with their son Waywood was no longer theoretical. It wasn't just Danny's land anymore. It was inhabited, lived in, tested daily. Danny the Dragon was rooted. Lee the Snake was coiled. Supporters existed mostly in spirit now. Messages, supplies, beliefs from afar. But on the ground, the kingdom was small enough that every personality mattered, and volatile enough that every mismatch was felt immediately. That's when T arrived. Horse. Freedom-seeking, movement-driven, emotionally honest to the point of bluntness. T didn't arrive to dominate or destabilize. She arrived because the lifestyle fit her bones and the cause made sense to her nervous system. Horses don't need thrones. They need space, purpose, and a direction worth running toward. For a while, she paired with Scott. Tiger energy meeting horse energy. Momentum, passion, friction. When that didn't hold, Scott did the tiger thing properly. He didn't burn the place down. He didn't sabotage. He withdrew, took distance, regrouped elsewhere. T stayed, and that mattered. So now the woodland core was Danny, Lee, and T. Then came an ox rooster, self-declared shaman, heavy certainty, loud confidence, the kind of man who speaks in absolutes and believes conviction alone equals wisdom. Ox brings endurance and stubbornness. Rooster brings proclamation. Together unchecked, they form certainty without flexibility, ritual without humility. He didn't join Waywood so much as attempt to define it. That never ends well under a dragon. At roughly the same time Maud arrived. Tiger Ox. Maud wasn't there to start a kingdom. He wasn't there to follow Danny, and he certainly wasn't there to crown a king. He came for the lifestyle, the freedom, the off-grid way of living, and he stayed for T. The rest of it existed around that. Not because of it. Still, Tiger Ox carries a certain presence once it's inside a shared space. Watchful, territorial in subtle ways, steady but cautious, alert to where it stands and protective of what it feels connected to. That kind of energy doesn't shout, but it doesn't disappear either. Then there was the horse rooster, fast-moving, emotionally driven but unstable. Alcohol blurred the edges, dependent, needing momentum but lacking grounding. Horses need direction. Roosters need audience. Soon after came his friend, the dragon ox, immature dragon fire with ox inertia underneath, power without discipline, presence without responsibility. Add substance dependence to that mix and you get volatility. Destructive not because it wants to be, but because it doesn't know how not to be. The dragon ox didn't want structure, he wanted tolerance. Waywood was never built for that. And finally, a dog. Introverted, low drama, the kind of presence that doesn't demand attention. Dogs don't seek chaos. They absorb it. They endure. They keep going. She didn't shape events, but she softened their impact. As this all unfolded, Scott remained out, and into that vacuum stepped Maud. Tiger Ox. Powerful, grounded, direct. Where Scott's tiger had been fluid and exploratory, Maud's tiger was territorial and explosive. Ox beneath it gave weight and persistence, and suddenly the social balance shifted again. Too many apex energies. Too many strong instincts sharing too little space. Dragons, snakes, horses, tigers, oxen, dogs, roosters. Waywood became a melting point. The dragon core demanded sovereignty and clarity. The snake-dog dynamic pushed pressure and moral testing. The horse needed movement and freedom. The tiger ox asserted presence and ground holding. The horse rooster needed attention, an audience. The ox rooster tried to preach certainty. The dragon ox destabilized through excess. The dog absorbed fallout quietly. No one here was evil. But compatibility isn't about intent. It's about function. Clashes weren't dramatic at first. They were subtle. Friction in routines. Disagreements about authority. Who decides, who speaks, who leads, who just exists without pulling weight. Kingdom of Waywood was revealing itself. Because when you put that many archetypes into close proximity, the land doesn't lie. Roles clarify, masks fall, and the dragon watching it all learns something vital. A kingdom isn't built by who arrives, it's built by who remains functional when pressure rises. And Waywood was about to find out who that really was. Of course, there were others. This was a kingdom, not a closed circle. People came and went constantly. Some passed through like weather. Some left footprints and vanished. Some will be named later. Some won't be named at all. Some served their function, and that was enough. Others are still moving toward the moment where their role becomes apparent. But this isn't a story about the kingdom. This is just context. Some people don't need to be named. They are part of Waywood, not the improbable myth. One consistency remained unmistakable, however. Ellen, back and forth like clockwork. Snake dragon routine, presence without possession, insight without interference. She never needed to anchor herself permanently to Waywood to influence it. She moved in rhythm, not in residence. That mattered. Another figure worth noting is Mandy, rooster sheep, quietly present, background steady, geographically close, much like Autumn had been. Never dominant, never absent. Not frequent, but consistent. The kind of presence that doesn't disrupt the field, but softens it. And his little bird. The monkey still in orbit, but further out than ever before. Not gone, never gone. Just distant enough that the shift could be felt. And it was felt. Distance doesn't break resonance, it sharpens awareness. The gap didn't go unnoticed. Meanwhile, inside Danny's mind, another awareness was settling in. Leadership brings a specific kind of vigilance. He knew, without paranoia, without fantasy, that anyone inside Waywood could attempt to bring it down. Not necessarily out of malice, sometimes out of fear, sometimes ego, sometimes simply misalignment. That knowledge sat quietly in the background, adding weight to every decision. Another pressure layered onto sovereignty. Still, there were those who showed loyalty through action. Those who helped build, who sowed seeds, who worked without needing recognition. There were many, but John, the horse, Gemma, the ox, and Jimmy the rooster, even Jason the rat, they still have parts to play. Everyone who comes to Waywood found roles, different temperaments, different rhythms, all functional, all contributing. No theater. There were also supporters who never needed to set foot inside the woodland to matter. Kate, the boar, the mud hut lady who inspired Danny exactly when he needed it. She was a major motivator for Danny. These roles are not small. Each one of them plays a major part, but once their part is played, their story then just remains consistent and distant. Where we are here to look at the improbable myth. Support in spirit carries weight of its own. Distance doesn't dilute belief when it's real. There were those whose stories branched away entirely, yet still traced back to Waywood. Tim and Ruth, both rats. They'd met at the first gathering, not seeking destiny, not chasing myth, just two paths crossing at the right moment. They moved on to build something of their own, quiet, personal, real. Their story didn't stay inside the kingdom, but it started there. Rats intuitively shaped by encountering the dragon. That matters, because kingdoms don't just shape those who stay, they shape those who pass through. And Waywood, at this point, wasn't stable or unstable. It was alive, still forming, still filtering, still deciding who belonged where and who didn't. And the dragon at its center knew something the others didn't yet. The next phase wouldn't be about growth. It would be about discernment. And so those who belonged to the edges remained there. They came and went through the gates of the kingdom, passing in and out of Waywood's gravity, touching the perimeter, but never quite stepping into the core. Background figures, necessary but not central. Witnesses more than residents. At the center, the field narrowed. Danny the dragon, Lee the snake dog, a self-proclaimed shaman ox, the two fools, a horse rooster, and dragon ox. A silent, almost invisible dog, and Mod and T tiger ox and horse. These were the ones now shaping daily life inside the kingdom. These were the energies rubbing up against each other in close quarters, influencing rhythm, tension, and direction. Waywood was no longer being defined by intention alone. It was being defined by cohabitation, by who could exist under pressure without fracturing the whole. And while all of this played out visibly, other forces were already moving beneath the surface. Another Waywoodian was entering the picture. Cat, Snake's dragon, Capricorn. She didn't arrive loudly. She didn't force entry. She sought Danny out deliberately at a pagan gathering, drawn by something she couldn't quite name but trusted enough to follow. Another chance meeting, another convergence that didn't feel accidental. 3 gatherings, 3 encounters, 3 karmic markers. Tree, the dragon witch. The wyvern, the dragon elder. And now Cat, the snake dragon. Each meeting distinct, each relationship different in tone and function, and each one significant enough that the story will circle back to them later. These weren't passing characters. They were karmic anchors, reference points in the mythic architecture forming around Danny's life. And before the narrative moves forward, one more presence must be acknowledged, not chronologically precise, but karmically inevitable. Through a collective, unintentional alignment, the wyvern and cat, dragon and snake helped construct the conditions for another meeting to occur. Neither of them knew it at the time. No planning, no orchestration, just pressure and timing doing what they always do. That's how Tommy entered the story. Another dragon. His arrival will matter later. For now, his presence simply needs to be marked, because some connections don't make sense when they happen. They only make sense when you look back and realize the ground was being prepared long before you ever stepped onto it. For a moment, kingdoms and woodlands recede into the background. What takes focus instead is the pattern. Lee, the snake. Catalyst, pressure, karmic ignition, the snake. Observer, regulator, precision and timing. Tree, the dragon. The witch, authority without hierarchy. Recognition without crowning. The wyvern, another dragon. The elder, memory, continuity, weight of lived cycles. Cat, the snake dragon, bridge between generations, intuition fused with ambition, awareness arriving early. Tommy, the dragon, force not yet activated, power waiting for its moment. This is not coincidence. In Chinese Zodiac psychology, snake and dragon are not opposites. They are interdependent forces. Snake brings insight, pressure, and transformation. Dragon brings presence, will, and gravity. When they cluster like this, it signals a karmic convergence, not a social one. This wasn't multiple realities overlapping. This was one reality concentrating itself. Each snake arrived with a lesson. Each dragon arrived with a responsibility. Some came to test, some came to witness. Some came to prepare the ground. Some came simply because the pattern demanded their presence. And that matters, because when you see this many aligned archetypes crossing paths in a compressed span of time, you're not watching coincidence unfold. You're watching timing assert itself. The system was assembling its pieces. And for context, because context always matters, it's worth remembering this. The very first invitation to a pagan gathering that set all of this in motion came from a different snake altogether. Nothing here is random. And with that alignment quietly in place, the story shifts again, away from construction, away from settlement, and toward the next phase of testing. The kingdom is about to be challenged, not from outside, but from within the karmic pattern itself. By this point, the ground-level mind fortress was already built, not imagined, not symbolic, built inside Danny. Rooms defined, roles assigned, courts functioning, filters working. The internal system was no longer chaotic. It was operational. It could run without constant supervision. It could hold pressure, process threat, and regulate response. That structure existed entirely internally. What came next was not its creation. It was its projection. And that projection wasn't Danny's idea. The kingdom, the woodland, the territory, Waywood, and the physical world did not emerge from ego or entitlement. Danny didn't wake up one day and decide to rule anything. He didn't chase followers. The kingdom came into existence through bestowment, almost against his will. And the ones applying the pressure weren't dragons. They were snake and horse. Lee, snake, didn't build with him. She forced confrontation. She applied karmic pressure where the internal structure was complete but untested externally. Snake energy doesn't care about comfort. It cares about alignment. She kept pushing Danny towards situations where the internal system had to be expressed outwardly or collapse under its own weight. She didn't say, be a leader. She made it impossible not to be one. T, horse, worked differently. Where snake pressured, horse pulled. Intuition, momentum, direction, horses sense the path before it's visible. She didn't argue philosophy or structure. She moved forward and expected everyone to move with her. Stay still too long, and horse leaves you behind. Between them, something crucial happened. They weren't creating the kingdom. They were insisting the internal structure be honored externally. The mind fortress already existed. The snake demanded it face reality. The horse demanded it move. And so the kingdom of Waywood wasn't invented, it was revealed. The woodland became territory, not because Danny wanted power, but because the internal order he'd built could no longer remain private. Reality had to match the architecture inside him, or the dissonance would tear everything apart. That's how sovereignty happens when it's real, not declared, recognized. Up until now, Danny's focus had been narrow, but intense. He was holding the boundary, external authority, pressure, interference. He was holding the interior, preventing Waywood from collapsing under incompatible archetypes and unresolved power struggles. That alone would have been enough for most men. What he wasn't prepared for was this. Other nations were watching, not enemies, not authorities, not followers, peers. Because when a sovereign structure stabilizes, even a small one, it creates a signal. And people who operate at that level don't need announcements, they feel it. This is where the story leaves survival and enters diplomacy. Because the next presence didn't arrive to test Danny's boundaries, he arrived to acknowledge them. This is where the Emperor of Stormaria, Andrew, steps into the field, not to conquer, not to submit, but to recognize another system that had achieved coherence. Danny had been preparing for siege. He was not prepared for equals. And when sovereign systems meet, the question is never who rules, it's whether they can stand without destabilizing each other. That's where the next phase begins. At this point, Waywood had stopped being a camp and started behaving like a settlement, not in name, in function. The layout settled into something medieval, almost by instinct. Primitive structures, sure, but intentional ones. Outbuildings where they were needed. Communal spaces forming naturally where paths crossed, often enough to wear the ground bare. Wash areas, storage, fire pits that became meeting points. Residents stayed pitched in areas they gravitated toward, creating loose districts. It wasn't chaos, it was order emerging under pressure. And here's the bit people miss if they're not paying attention. This wasn't just physical growth. This was political evolution. This is where the round table of the Kingdom of Waywood came into being. Because words matter when sovereignty is forming. The structure of governance didn't come from books or ideology. It came from necessity. Too many personalities, too much friction, too many variables living too close together. If this thing was going to survive, it needed a way to sort people without crushing them. Enter the Chinese Zodiac. And here's where it gets fucking wild. Because for all his intent to sabotage, that old, vindictive monkey from the past handed Danny one of the most powerful tools he'd ever used before it ever raised a flag. Accidentally handed Danny one of the most powerful tools he'd ever used. That monkey wanted to strike a match. What he actually did was deliver a lens. The Zodiac didn't just become another belief system on Omnist Hill. It didn't just fill a shelf in the internal library. It became a filter, a way to understand not just who people were, but where they functioned in a community. And Danny actually fucking used it. Not as fate, not as superstition, as psychological pattern recognition. Dragon, snake, horse, tiger, ox, dog. Suddenly personalities weren't just clashing, they were revealing their roles, strengths, limits, life. A line was drawn, not cruelly, not emotionally, but structurally. At the round table sat Danny the Dragon, central, unavoidable, already operating as the axis whether he liked it or not. The snake, pressure, catalyst, consequence. The horse, momentum, intuition, endurance. Tiger, presence, confrontation, territorial strength. The ox, stability, stubbornness, labor, structure. Dog, quiet, observant, vigilant. No duplicates, no fucking musical chairs because longevity mattered. T had been there from the beginning. The horse rooster wasn't replacing her. Danny was the dragon. So the dragon ox wasn't about to usurp the soon-to-be crowned king at his own council. This is where the contrast became impossible to ignore. Dragon, dragon, Danny, horse, horse, T. When aligned, build. They stabilize. They endure. They produce something that lasts. But dragon, ox, and horse, rooster unchecked do something else entirely. They were fools. They were disruptors, mischievous, narcissistic, destructive, not evil but incompatible with governance. Their energy didn't strengthen the system. It tested it endlessly without offering resolution. At first, their focus turned toward the ox because an ox draws that kind of attention. Stubbornness attracts challenge, but the deeper truth was simpler. There was no seat for them, and they could feel it. And here's the part you need to hear clearly. This was not fishing. Danny wasn't sat on a bridge with a rod and specific bait like some fucking mythic Pokemon trainer catching Zodiacs. He didn't go looking for people because of the Zodiac. He analyzed the people who came through the Zodiac, and they all came organically. Every single one. T crossed the country on a bike, bags on her back, drawn by something she couldn't articulate. Maud came from further down the coast, pulled first by the lifestyle, then by T. Some had nowhere else to go or wanted escape, a playground, looking for sanctuary. Danny didn't chase them. He sat in the woodland, in his territory, in clean space, and they came to him. They crossed the gates, they stayed, they revealed themselves. And just as the round table settled, just as the system began to hold, one more character walked in at exactly the right time. Another piece, another variable, another role not yet understood, a fucking snake monkey. And at the center of all of this sat Danny. Dragon, Capricorn. That combination alone is already heavy. Add schizophrenia into the mix, and you don't get madness by default. You get amplified pattern sensitivity under pressure. The mind doesn't fragment randomly. It overprocesses. It builds systems because it has to. When reality delivers too many variables at once, the dragon doesn't collapse. It architects. Double dragon means constant internal momentum, drive layered on drive, stacked on will. There is no natural off switch. Rest doesn't come easily. Stillness has to be engineered. Capricorn stretches that intensity over time. Years, decades, lifetimes. Demanding endurance, responsibility, consequence. This isn't a personality built for comfort. It's built for burden. Schizophrenia in this context wasn't chaos. It was permeability. A thinner membrane between internal structure and external signal. More data coming in, more meaning extracted, more threads noticed. That's dangerous without containment. But with containment, with the mind fortress functioning, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes leadership under extreme cognitive load. By now, Danny wasn't chasing authority. He was feeling the pressure of holding it. Even when leadership was bestowed, even when others insisted on it, even when the system clearly oriented around him. Because dragon leadership doesn't feel like power. It feels like weight. Every conflict landed heavier. Every decision echoed longer. Every misalignment inside the kingdom registered immediately in his nervous system. He could hold the line, but holding it cost something. Sleep, silence, ease, the illusion of anonymity. And yet he held it, not theatrically, not flawlessly, but deliberately. The dragon didn't roar because it wanted attention. It roared because silence was no longer possible. This wasn't ego inflation. It was role acceptance under pressure. The schizophrenic dragon Capricorn, doesn't get to opt out once the structure stabilizes. When people start orienting, when systems respond, when territory holds, stepping back creates more damage than staying present. So Danny stayed, aware of the strain, aware of the risk, aware that leadership would test him in ways nothing else ever had. And still, he held the center. Because dragons don't choose sovereignty, they endure it.